My mother called my husband's 6-year-old daughter extra baggage, then cut me out of the family for 9 years. 9 days after our company went public, she returned with a $2.5 million bill. But inside the statement she demanded I sign was one sentence proving that my dying father had recovered 9 years earlier. Caleb read the line twice, smiled without humor, and pushed the folder toward me. "Don't sign it," he said. "She just gave you the truth in her own handwriting to understand why that sentence mattered. You have to understand the house where I grew up. My name is Mara Ellison, and I was raised in Pine Hollow, a small California town pressed against the lower slopes of the Sierra Nevada. We were not poor. My mother made sure everyone knew that before they knew anything else about us. We lived on a quiet street lined with sycamores. My parents belonged to the right church, attended the right fundraisers, and owned Ridge House, a cedar cabin my grandfather had built above town. My mother, Vivian, spoke about that cabin as if it were proof of our family's character. "The Ellisons preserve what matters," she liked to say. What she meant was that we preserved appearances. In our home, love was not something freely given. It worked more like credit. You earned it through obedience, good manners, achievement, and usefulness. You could lose it by embarrassing the family, questioning my mother, or needing too much at the wrong time. My older sister, Brooke, almost always had excellent credit. When Brooke left for college, my parents paid her tuition because she needed room to focus on her future. When I enrolled 3 years later, I took student loans and worked weekends at a grocery store because my mother said I was more practical. "You're stronger than Brooke," she told me. "You don't need as much help." The sentence sounded like praise until I understood what it purchased. Brooke wrecked her first car after driving home from a party. My parents replaced it before the insurance claim was finished. When my transmission failed 2 years later, my mother told me inconvenience built responsibility. Brooke's first consulting business collapsed within 18 months. My parents quietly paid several of her debts, then warned me never to mention the failure because she was already carrying enough shame. That was how our family worked. Brooke's pain required protection. Mine required endurance. My father, Thomas, never shouted at me. For years, I confused that with kindness. He was a quiet man who repaired hinges, sharpened kitchen knives, and remembered which pie each daughter preferred. But when my mother made a decision that hurt me, he never stood between us. Instead, he folded his dinner napkin. Once lengthwise, once across, then again until it became a small, exact square beneath his hands. I learned to read that square before I learned to read contracts. It meant he had heard everything and chosen not to interfere. Silence was not neutral in our house. It always allowed the stronger person to win. Because my mother could reshape any argument depending on her audience, I became a keeper of records. I saved birthday cards, text messages, receipts, handwritten notes, and scraps of paper bearing promises. People later denied making. I wrote dates in the corners. I kept envelopes. I remembered exact phrases. At first, it was self-defense. Later, it became my profession. I worked in the underwriting records department of a regional insurance company, where my job was to compare what people claimed had happened with what the documents could actually prove. Dates mattered, signatures mattered, photographs mattered. A confident voice did not become true merely because it filled the room. One afternoon, while sorting through an old box, I found a photograph of Ridge House. The cabin looked beautiful from a distance. Weathered cedar walls, a deep porch, tall pines framing the roof like a postcard. But the photograph also showed what none of us discussed. Branches touched the shingles, Dry needles covered the slope. The wooden deck had darkened with age. The narrow road curved uphill without enough space for a fire engine to turn around. My mother still called Ridge House our irreplaceable inheritance. I did not yet understand that the thing my family was proudest of was also the thing most likely to burn. A few months later, on a rainy Tuesday, a man walked into my office carrying a battered folder against his chest. Behind him sat a small girl with a box of crayons. She worked carefully, pressing hard enough to break the red crayon's paper wrapper open. She was coloring a house red. The man who entered my office that rainy Tuesday did not look angry. He looked tired in the careful way of someone trying not to become angry in front of his child. He introduced himself as Caleb Hart and placed a battered folder on my desk. His vegetation management company had just been hit with an insurance increase. One hillside property his crew had cleared was still classified as high risk, even though they had removed dead brush, trimmed lower branches, and opened defensible space around the house. "I'm not asking you to make an exception for me," he said. "I just want to know how old the data is that they're using to judge my work." Most people wanted a decision changed. Caleb wanted to understand how it had been made. I pulled the property file and compared it with his inspection documents. The insurer's vegetation layer was almost 18 months old. There were no post-work photographs. The satellite image still showed the dark shapes of trees his crew had cut, and the system could not distinguish standing timber from old shadows on the slope. I could not reverse the increase from my desk. I explained that underwriting would need a formal review, updated photographs, and proof that the work had been completed by a licensed contractor. Caleb nodded instead of arguing. "So the house changed," he said. "But the file didn't." I wrote that sentence in my notes. Behind him, the girl from the waiting area was drawing with the seriousness of an engineer. She had colored several houses green, the trees around them red, and drawn a crooked line down the page. At the bottom of the hill, she marked a large X. "What does the line mean?" I asked. "The way out," she said. "And the X?" "The fire truck can't turn there." Caleb glanced back. "Lucy notices things." I pointed to the red trees. "Are those dangerous?" Lucy considered the question. "Red doesn't mean bad," she said. "It just means you shouldn't stand too close." Years later, I would understand that she had drawn more than a fire map. Caleb returned the next week with updated photographs, then again to thank me after the review reduced the increase. We began talking outside the office, first over coffee, then over inexpensive dinners because neither of us had money to waste. Han owed money on equipment, drove a truck old enough to vote, and sometimes lost his temper when pressure stacked too high. He also said that when it happened, he apologized, named what he had done, and tried to repair the damage. His only plan was to keep his company alive 1 month at a time. "I'm not a safe investment, Mara," he said. "I just don't want you discovering that after you've already trusted me." That honesty drew me toward him. I had grown up around people who hid every weakness until it could be blamed on someone else. Caleb placed his limitations on the table and let me decide what they meant. Lucy was harder to know. Her mother had left when she was very young. Caleb never called the woman selfish or cruel. He only said, "She couldn't stay. I decided Lucy would never believe she was the reason." Lucy did not ask whether I would return after a visit. She watched. When I walked toward my car, she ran to the front window. If I returned for something forgotten, I caught her checking whether the car remained. She corrected me the first time I shortened her name to Luce. "That's not my name yet," she said, so I stopped. I did not promise I would never leave. Promises that large would have been for my comfort, not hers. Instead, I arrived when I said I would. I called when I promised. I attended a parent conference when Caleb was trapped on a job. I repaired the broken latch on her lunchbox and learned to make the buttered noodles she liked without pepper. Trust entered our lives through repetition. One afternoon, months later, I left their house and looked back. Lucy was still at the kitchen table drawing. She had not gone to the window. She did not call me Mom. I never asked her to. A child who had been left once deserved to choose her own words and pace. Around that time, Caleb returned to the question that had brought him into my office. Insurance companies already have wildfire maps, he said. What they don't have is reliable proof that a house today is no longer the house they measured 18 months ago. I wrote the sentence on the back of a claim folder. Nearly a year after we met, I agreed to bring Caleb and Lucy to dinner with my family. I believed my mother might be cold to a grown man, but not cruel to a child. I was wrong. A few weeks before the dinner, my father was taken to the hospital with chest pain. Doctors found a blocked artery, placed a stent, and kept him overnight. His cardiologist said the procedure had gone well. He needed medication, rest, and little stress. My mother translated that into something frightening. "One more shock could kill your father," Vivian told me. I had no access to his records. Thomas answered with phrases like, "I'm doing all right," and "Your mother worries." I knew heart disease could turn suddenly. Fear made those possibilities hard to separate. So when Caleb and Lucy came to dinner, I was trying to keep the evening calm. Vivian had set the table with the good china and silverware. Lucy sat beside me. My mother began with Caleb's family. Where had he grown up? What did his parents do? Had anyone attended college? Then she asked whether he had a degree. "No," Caleb said. "I started working full-time when Lucy was born." Vivian nodded as though confirming a number. "And vegetation management is reliable work?" "It is necessary work," Caleb replied. "Reliable depends on the season." Brooke smiled into her wine. My mother moved to Lucy's mother. "Where is she now?" "She isn't part of Lucy's daily life," Caleb said. "By choice?" "Vivian," I warned. "I'm only trying to understand what Mara is entering." Every question sounded less like an introduction than an inspection. Caleb was not a man at her table. He was an asset with uncertain value. Thomas said nothing. He folded his napkin lengthwise, then across. Lucy watched him. Then she looked down and moved her hand from the dinner fork to the smaller one. She barely spoke. She chewed slowly, finished everything, and waited for permission before taking more water. I had never taught her that. The room had. When dessert came, I reached for Caleb's hand beneath the table. "There's something we want to tell you," I said. "We're getting married." Brooke's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Thomas looked at me, then at my mother. Vivian looked directly at Lucy. "This family is not taking on extra baggage," she said. The words were quiet enough to sound controlled and loud enough for everyone to hear. Lucy froze with her spoon near her lips. She did not know every meaning of baggage, but children understand temperature before vocabulary. She knew she had been measured and found too heavy to carry. Caleb pushed his chair back. I placed my hand over his. "Please," I said. "Let me." I asked my mother into the kitchen. The moment the door swung behind us, she dropped her tone. "You can walk out with that man and his child," she said. "But if you do not come back expecting everything to remain where you left it." Her name is Lucy. That does not change what you are choosing. I am choosing people who have never asked me to become smaller so they can feel bigger. Her face hardened. "Your father nearly died. Do you want this to be the last thing you do to him?" I looked through the doorway. Thomas had heard her. He sat close enough to answer without raising his voice. Instead, he folded the napkin again, pressing it into a smaller square. That was his choice. I returned, took Lucy's coat, and told Caleb we were leaving. No one stopped us. In the car, Lucy stayed silent until Caleb started the engine. Then she asked, "They don't like me, do they?" I could have promised everything would be fixed. That answer would have protected me more than her. "They don't know how to see you correctly," I said. "But Mom does." The word came before I planned it. Lucy looked at me. She did not call me Mom. She placed her hand inside mine. That night, Thomas texted me, "Do not call for a while. Your mother says every time this comes up, my blood pressure rises." He had typed it himself. He had pressed send. I read it as proof that contact with me might endanger him. Years later, I understood it as proof that he chose comfort over truth. Caleb and I married in Ruth Palmer's backyard. There were 14 guests. The string lights shorted twice. Caleb wore a borrowed jacket, and Lucy scattered petals. Ruth covered the folding table with the only linen cloth her late husband had left her. Before the ceremony, Caleb said, "If they ever knock, I won't stop you from opening the door, but I will not let them step over Lucy to reach you." I mailed my parents an invitation. 2 weeks later, it returned unopened. My name had been crossed out in my mother's handwriting. Across the front were 3 words, "Return to sender." I kept it, not because I knew it would become evidence, but because I did not know how to throw away something my mother had touched. After the wedding, relatives began calling. Each told the same story. I had abandoned my sick father for a man with no future. Vivian never told the family that Thomas would die within weeks. She did not need a lie that clear. She said his heart was weak. She said the cardiologist had ordered him to avoid stress. She said every attempt I made to defend my marriage forced him to relive the shock. She told relatives that Thomas could not survive another emotional blow, and that I continued making selfish choices anyway. Because the heart attack had been real. People believed the rest. I believed enough of it too. Whenever I considered driving to Pine Hollow, I imagined my father collapsing because I had appeared at the door. Fear did not need certainty. It only needed a possibility. I could not forgive myself for testing. For the first 2 years, Lucy made birthday cards for my parents. She drew greenhouses, red trees, smiling stick figures, and a family standing beneath a wide yellow sun. The first cards came back unopened. I let her see the earliest one because I still believed honesty meant sharing everything. Her face changed when she recognized her own handwriting. After that, I stopped showing her the returned envelopes. I kept the original cards in a tin box and told her my parents were not ready. That was not the whole truth. It was the gentlest part I could give her. I was wrong to keep hoping for so long, but I was trying to protect her from being rejected in the same place twice. Our first years together were not dramatic. They were simply expensive. Caleb left before sunrise for clearing jobs. I worked extra hours, handled our bills, and kept records for his small company. The water heater in our rental failed every winter, usually when we had the least money to repair it. One night, Lucy developed a high fever while I was facing a deadline that could determine whether I kept an important assignment at work. My phone kept lighting up beside her bed. I turned it face down. I sat with a bowl of cool water, changed the cloth on her forehead, and counted the minutes between doses of medicine. By morning, her fever had broken and my deadline had passed. Lucy opened her eyes and said, "You didn't check your phone once." She sounded surprised. That was when I understood that children often recognize love through details adults barely notice. A year later, Lucy performed in a school concert. I saved a seat for Thomas. I had sent him the date through an aunt, though he never answered. The chair remained empty until Ruth arrived late, saw it, and sat down without asking. She applauded so loudly that Lucy laughed from the stage. Afterward, Lucy ran straight to Ruth. She did not look at the empty place I had preserved in my mind. I began to understand that family was not the person whose seat you reserved. Family was the person who actually sat down. My grandmother died when Lucy was 10. I learned about the funeral 3 days after it happened, from a cousin who assumed someone had contacted me. In the photographs, Brooke sat in the front row beside my parents. My name had not been forgotten. Vivian had removed it from the list. For the first time, I saw that our separation was no longer about protecting Thomas from stress. It had become a punishment maintained through birthdays, funerals, and every room where my absence could be displayed as evidence against me. The first crack appeared during a call with my Aunt June. She mentioned that Thomas still went fishing every month, then stopped speaking. I wrote down the date. A man with heart disease could fish. A photograph at a lake could not prove his condition was harmless. That uncertainty was exactly what kept Vivian's story alive. Nothing was clear enough to free me, and everything was frightening enough to keep me away. When Lucy was 12, she found the tin box. Inside were her cards, the returned envelopes, her name written across each one, and the corner of an old map she had once labeled family. "They knew I sent these?" she asked. "Yes." "Then why did you keep them?" "Because someday you might need proof that you did nothing wrong." Lucy stared at the box, then tore the corner marked family from the map. That night, after she slept, I repaired it with transparent tape. I finally admitted why I had kept knocking. It was not because I failed to see the closed door. It was because I had been taught that enough patience, usefulness, and suffering would eventually be mistaken for love. That year, I stopped sending letters. I placed the tin box on the highest shelf in our bedroom closet. During the same season, wildfires swept through the foothills, and Caleb's workload doubled. Standing among blackened lots, he recognized the problem insurance systems still had not solved. Truth was still hidden on the ground. The fires left the foothills looking unfinished. Caleb spent that season walking through blackened lots, measuring clearances, documenting damaged roofs, and explaining to frightened homeowners why cutting one tree mattered more than clearing an entire slope badly. He already knew insurance companies used wildfire models. They mapped wind, terrain, vegetation, drought, and historical fire paths. The gap was not that nobody understood risk. The gap was time. A house could replace its roof, remove dead branches, widen an access road, or create defensible space, yet remain trapped inside an 18-month-old score. There was often no standardized way to prove the work had been completed, who had inspected it, or whether the photographs belonged to the correct property. Homeowners were being judged by houses that no longer existed. "They know where fire has been," Caleb told me one night. "They don't know how the house has changed today." Ha understood the ground. I understood evidence. Miles Reed, one of Caleb's oldest friends, understood how to turn both into software. We called the company EmberTrace Analytics. Caleb designed the field inspection process. I built the records around it: geotagged photographs, timestamps, contractor credentials, verification forms, inspection logs, appeal procedures, and a chain of custody showing who had handled each piece of information. Miles built the platform that connected those records to property files. Our first paying customer was a regional insurer whose underwriting director agreed to test the system on 500 homes. The contract was modest, but it required us to prove that every inspection could survive a skeptical underwriter, an angry homeowner, and an audit performed months after the field visit. Nothing could depend on memory alone. It did not feel like success. We drove the routes ourselves. Caleb photographed rooflines and vegetation. I checked coordinates against parcel records. Miles repaired uploads from motel rooms. We corrected reports at midnight and answered the same question repeatedly. Why should anyone trust our data more than the images they already had? Our answer was never that we were smarter. It was that every conclusion could be traced back to a person, a place, a date, and a photograph. For a while, that was enough. Then, in 2020, a utility company canceled a pilot weeks before launch. Leadership had changed, the budget disappeared, and months of expected revenue vanished during one call. We had little cash left. Caleb sat at our kitchen table and said he should return to clearing trees full-time. He was not surrendering dramatically. He was calculating how long we could keep paying people before hope became dishonesty. I opened the accounts. 2 outside leases were draining money we no longer needed to spend. I canceled them. I renegotiated payment terms with existing customers and persuaded one insurer to pay part of its next contract in advance. It did not save the company. It bought 6 weeks. During the 5th week, another insurer called after a severe fire season exposed exactly the reporting problem we had been describing. Opportunity did not arrive because I performed a miracle. It arrived because we were still alive when the telephone rang. Those years also taught me what family looked like without a ledger. At Thanksgiving, Ruth dried out the turkey, Miles burned the bread. Lucy designed the seating map and moved everyone twice because she had decided the safest conversations required different distances. Nobody kept track of who bought more groceries or washed more dishes. Nobody reminded anyone what their presence had cost. At my childhood table, every chair had to be earned. At this one, nobody auditioned to keep a place. One evening, when Lucy was 8, she found an old photograph of Ridge House in a box. She studied the roof, the steep slope, and the pines pressing against the porch. "That house is red," she said. I laughed. She pointed more firmly. "The branches touch the roof, and the road is too small." I remembered her words even after I put the photograph away. By 2021, EmberTrace raised its first institutional round. In 2022, we expanded into several Western states. By 2023, nearly 100 people worked for the company. I became Chief Operating Officer. Caleb still visited field sites because he refused to trust a risk model he had never stood beneath. Miles led the data platform and argued with us whenever our procedures became more elegant than useful. We had built the company from 3 kinds of knowledge: what the land showed, what the documents proved, and what the system could preserve. One night, after another funding announcement, Caleb looked across the kitchen table and said, "If this company ever makes us rich, don't let money turn us into people who think paying for something means owning the people around it." A few weeks later, an article called him a founder changing wildfire insurance. Brooke texted me that afternoon. "I've been thinking about you so much." 4 messages later, she asked whether I would co-sign a loan. Brooke's first message arrived 3 days after the article about EmberTrace. She opened with a memory from childhood. The summer we slept on the porch at Ridge House because the power had failed. Then she said she missed me. She asked about Lucy and called her beautiful. 4 messages later, Brooke asked whether I would co-sign a business loan. She described it as temporary. She said the company only needed breathing room. She promised the bank would never come after me. I said no. Her warmth disappeared immediately. For 3 years, she did not contact me again. When rumors began that EmberTrace might go public, Brooke returned with almost the same script. She mentioned the same porch, the same power outage, and the same childhood joke. She praised Lucy again. Then she asked how much of the company Caleb and I actually owned. I placed the two conversations side by side. Same memory, same affection, same movement toward money. Ruth read them at my kitchen table. "They don't remember you," she said. "They remember you can be useful." I wanted to dismiss the pattern as coincidence, because admitting the truth meant surrendering the version of Brooke I had protected since childhood. But scripts reveal themselves through repetition, and hers always ended with my usefulness to her. A cousin later told me what Brooke had hidden. Her consulting firm had lost its largest client. She had been using company credit cards to preserve the appearance of growth. Her marriage had ended quietly. Although Vivian still told people Brooke's husband was traveling for work, at church events, my mother continued saying Brooke was expanding. Brooke needed money, but she needed something else more urgently. She needed Vivian to keep believing the golden child had never failed. That same month, Aunt June sent me a document from the trust that owned Ridge House. As co-trustee, she had received the insurance notice. The carrier would not renew the cabin's policy unless the owners completed major wildfire mitigation. The report listed insufficient defensible space, branches touching the roof, an access road too narrow for emergency vehicles, aging shingles, and several missed remediation deadlines. I heard Lucy's 8-year-old voice. "That house is red." My family had spent decades preserving the cabin as an emblem. They had polished furniture, repaired porch rails, and photographed every holiday gathering. They had neglected the things that would make the house survive an actual fire. A week later, another cousin sent me a photograph of Thomas at a lake. He had driven himself there, helped pull a small boat from the water, and stood laughing beside 2 friends. The picture had been taken the previous month. I did not treat it as proof that he had never been ill. A man with heart disease could fish. A good day could exist inside a serious diagnosis. But the photograph raised a different question. If Thomas could drive, travel, tow a boat, and live independently, why had the family continued saying that contact from me could place him in danger? Before the initial public offering, I hired Naomi Price as my personal attorney. She was not part of the securities team taking EmberTrace public. She handled civil disputes, reputation issues, and situations where family language concealed financial pressure. I showed her the returned invitation, Brooke's messages, Thomas's photograph, and the insurance notice. Naomi listened without interrupting. "Believing Vivian lied is not enough," she said. "The fishing photograph is not enough either. You need a recovery timeline, statements made after that recovery, and evidence showing why she maintained the story." I asked whether I should confront my mother. "No," Naomi said. "Do not ask her to confess. When people want money badly enough, they usually write their motive down." Vivian had another reason to control the narrative. The Pine Hollow Heritage Foundation planned to honor her for contributions to family and community. Local people had begun asking why her successful younger daughter never appeared in photographs, holiday letters, or church events. Vivian needed Brooke's failure hidden. She needed Ridge House repaired. She needed a family photograph beside her award. Most of all, she needed a public statement saying she had never rejected me. EmberTrace went public that spring at a valuation near $240 million. The shares Caleb and I held were worth roughly $44 million on paper. The phrase "on paper" mattered. Our stock was locked for 180 days. We could not sell it immediately. Most of our wealth was not cash, and any business arrangement involving relatives would face the rules governing a public company. 9 days after the listing, Vivian called. She did not apologize. She said, "It has been too long. I think we should heal before outsiders misunderstand our family." She wanted to visit Saturday. Brooke would come with her. I agreed to one meeting, not because I believed they had changed. I wanted to hear what they would ask for once they could no longer pretend money had nothing to do with their return. Before Saturday, Caleb, Naomi, and I agreed on 5 rules. We would not secretly record the meeting. Every condition Vivian or Brooke raised had to be put in writing. We would make no decision that day. We would discuss no confidential company material. And if either of them insulted Lucy, the meeting would end immediately. Caleb asked, "What do you want me to do if they cross the line?" "Do not rescue me," I said. "Just remind me what I decided before they arrived." Lucy knew only the outline. My mother and sister wanted to talk about money, Ridge House, and the family story they had told for years. Lucy chose to spend the afternoon with Ruth. Before leaving, she placed her old map in my hands. "In case you forget which houses are red," she said. Vivian arrived in the navy suit she wore to foundation dinners and church events. Brooke followed with a leather document bag. My mother entered slowly, taking in the furniture, the neighborhood visible through the front windows, the photographs on the walls, and every detail that might help her estimate our life. She called Caleb my son-in-law. For the first time, I understood immediately. Her opinion of him had not changed. She had only changed the number she placed beside his name. We sat in the living room. Vivian spoke about healing, shared history, and the responsibilities that came with success. Then Brooke opened the bag and removed a bound document. The title read, "Ellison Family Restoration and Stability Agreement." The document never used the word demand. It referred instead to balance, preservation, continuity, and fairness. The first section required Caleb and me to contribute $2.5 million to a family stability fund. The second required us to pay personally for renovations at Ridge House, including the roof, access road, and wildfire mitigation. The third asked EmberTrace to evaluate the cabin before other properties already waiting for service. The fourth proposed a consulting contract for Brooke's firm worth $250,000 each year. The fifth established an $8,000 monthly care fund for Thomas. The final section required me to publish a statement before Vivian's community awards ceremony. I read every page without interrupting. Then I asked, "Did Dad request this care fund?" Vivian answered before Brooke could speak. "Your father is not the kind of man who opens his mouth and asks." Brooke leaned forward. "You have $44 million. Mara, none of this would even change your life." She said, "Have, not earned." She said, "Need, not deserve." For the first time, the purpose of the visit sounded honest. Caleb took the document and read it carefully. He reached the attached public statement, paused, and then smiled. It was not amusement. It was recognition. He turned the pages toward me. "You should read the 3rd paragraph," he said. I found the line. "I acknowledge that my father recovered following his cardiac procedure in 2017, but I voluntarily maintained distance from my family in the years that followed." Vivian wanted me to sign away the entire history. The sentence would make my absence appear deliberate. It would suggest the family had always welcomed me. It would protect her award, her standing, and the story she had told Pine Hollow. But it also contained the fact she had avoided stating for 9 years. Thomas had recovered in 2017. I read the sentence again. Then I looked at my mother. When did you know Dad had recovered? Vivian's eyes moved from my face to the document. That is not what this meeting is about. It is exactly what this meeting is about. She reached across the table. Give me that. You are twisting the language. Caleb placed one hand on the edge of the paper, but he did not pull it away from her. He looked at me, waiting. The choice was mine, and for once, I made it deliberately. I held the document flat against the table. Brooke's voice sharpened. Dad recovering does not change the fact that you left. No, I said. It changes what everyone was told about why I did not come back. Vivian began speaking about context, medical uncertainty, and how difficult those years had been for everyone. Her words moved quickly, covering the sentence as though enough language could hide it again. I did not open the tin box. I did not show the returned invitation. Lucy's cards, Brooke's repeated messages, or the dates I had recorded, not yet. Naomi had told me that evidence mattered most when people had already committed themselves to a version of events. Vivian had just committed hers to paper. A knock sounded at the front door. Brooke stopped speaking. Vivian's face lost color. Caleb looked toward the hallway. But I stood first. When I opened the door, Thomas was standing on the porch alone. He was upright, steady, and holding a thick envelope of records against his chest. He looked past me at Vivian. Do not ask your mother when I recovered, he said. I can answer that myself. Thomas had driven himself. He entered without assistance, carrying the envelope against his chest. Vivian had told him the meeting was about reconciliation, but he had seen a draft bearing his name and decided she would not use his health as leverage again. He sat across from me. For the first time in my life, he did not reach for a napkin. His hands rested flat on his knees. I have Medicare, he said. I have supplemental insurance and a pension. I do not use home care. I did not request $8,000 a month. And I did not agree to have my name placed in this document. He opened the envelope and laid out a discharge summary, follow-up records, and a letter confirming that he had returned to normal activity within months of the procedure. Then he looked at me. Your mother did not take the phone out of my hand, he said. I saw your name. I knew you were calling. I chose not to answer because answering you meant confronting her. Vivian whispered his name. He continued, I was not silent because I did not know what to say. I was silent because my peace mattered more to me than your truth. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only named what he had done. Caleb remained beside me, quiet as agreed. He did not answer for me or touch the papers until Vivian reached toward them. Even then, he looked at me first. That quiet restraint mattered. For years, decisions in my family had been made by the loudest person in the room. Now the room waited for me. Lucy's folded map rested beneath the tin box, its red marks visible along the edge like a warning. I went to the closet and brought down the tin box. I placed the returned wedding invitation beside Thomas's records, then Lucy's birthday cards. Then messages Vivian had sent relatives after Thomas recovered, saying his heart could not survive another shock. I added Brooke's 2 nearly identical conversations, the cabin's non-renewal notice, and the agreement admitting Thomas had recovered in 2017. Each item answered a different question. The medical records established when he recovered. Vivian's messages showed what she said afterward. The cards showed who had rejected whom. Brooke's messages showed why affection had suddenly returned. The cabin notice explained one financial need. The agreement connected all of it to the price they had placed on reconciliation. I read Brooke's 2 message threads aloud. Same memory, same compliment, same request. She finally said, "You do not understand. I actually need help." "You do not only need money," I said. "You need Mom to keep believing you have never failed." Her face tightened. "You have no idea what it feels like to have everyone expect something from you." "I do," I said. "The difference is that when you failed, they rescued you. When I failed, they used it as proof I was unworthy." I could understand what our family had made of Brooke without volunteering to repair it. Vivian stared at Lucy's cards. For several seconds, something in her expression loosened. "I did not know she kept sending them," she said. "Her name is written on every envelope. You knew." Brooke leaned toward her. "Mom, do not let her turn you into a monster." The softness disappeared from Vivian's face. "This is more complicated than the version you are presenting." That was her final choice. She had reached the edge of the truth and stepped backward to protect the image she preferred. I placed my hand on the agreement. Raising a child is not a loan. I did not sign a contract when I was born. You cannot bill me for performing the responsibilities of a mother. I listed my decisions clearly. There would be no $2.5 million fund, no consulting contract for Brooke, no priority treatment for Ridge House, no public statement written by Vivian, no money transferred through her. If Dad has a documented medical need in the future, I will consider paying a provider directly, I said. "But I will not purchase the right to be called your daughter," Thomas said. "I want to make this right." "I believe you are telling the truth today," I answered. But one truthful day does not erase 9 silent years. If he wanted any chance of rebuilding trust, he would correct the story with everyone who had heard it. He would not pressure Lucy. He would not ask me for money. He would not blame everything on Vivian. And he would accept that we might never allow him back. He nodded. Vivian stood. "You cannot treat your mother like you had 9 years to speak," I said. "Today you came with a bill. This conversation is over." I opened the front door. Vivian and Brooke walked out first. Thomas followed, carrying his records and asking for nothing. I closed the door and turned the lock. The click was small, for the first time in my life. A closed door was not shutting me out. It was protecting the people inside. The next morning, EmberTrace's legal counsel forwarded me an email. Brooke had contacted the board directly, attached her resume, and claimed I had promised her a position in the company. The fight was not entirely finished. But this time, I was not alone. And I was no longer missing proof. Naomi's letter went out the following Monday. It required Vivian and Brooke to stop repeating false statements, to avoid contacting EmberTrace employees or board members directly, and to correct the recent claims they had already circulated. The letter demanded no money and threatened no public exposure. It simply made clear that any further contact would be documented. For the first time, the law asked only for truth, not revenge. Brooke tried to interest a local reporter in a story about a wealthy founder abandoning her family, but the agreement she had drafted, together with Thomas's records and her own emails, made the story difficult to sustain. The community did not turn against Vivian all at once. Aunt June called to apologize. One uncle said family matters should remain private. Several people continued defending my mother. Vivian withdrew from chairing the Heritage fundraiser for personal reasons, but she still attended church and kept many of her friends. My mother did not lose her entire world. She lost the right to decide the only version everyone was allowed to hear. Thomas began doing what I had asked without demanding a reward. He wrote to each relative who had heard the old story. He stated that he had recovered in 2017, that I had not abandoned a dying man, and that he had allowed Vivian's version to continue because silence had been easier. He moved into a small apartment, paid his own expenses, began therapy, and never asked me for money. He did not contact Lucy without permission. 6 months later, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Forgiveness can begin in a moment, I told him. Trust is measured in repeated days. When Thomas asked whether Lucy might meet him, the decision belonged to her. She chose a public cafe. Caleb and I would be present. Thomas could not blame Vivian, and he could not ask Lucy to call him Grandpa. During the meeting, Lucy asked, "Did you see the cards?" "Yes," Thomas said, "and I did not stop them from being returned." Lucy did not hug him. "Thank you for not lying this time," she said. For a first meeting, that was enough. Brooke sold the house she could no longer afford, closed her consulting business, accepted a salaried position, and negotiated her own repayment plan. Months later, she sent me a photograph of her first paycheck without a message. I replied, "Keep it. No one can say you owe them for something you earned yourself." We were not reconciled. It was only a small sign that she might be learning to live without rescue. One evening, Ruth joined Caleb, Lucy, and me for dinner. Caleb burned the garlic. Lucy narrated his failure like a sports commentator. Ruth laughed until she had to set down her glass. Nobody kept score. Nobody calculated sacrifice. Lucy had framed her old map and hung it beside our front door. She pointed to the red marks. "Red does not mean we hate them," she said. "It means we do not stand too close when they start burning." Family is not made of people who keep invoices for what they gave you. Family is made of those who remain when you have nothing to offer, and who ask for no ownership when you suddenly have everything. Do you think Thomas deserved the chance to rebuild trust after 9 years of silence? Or should some doors remain closed? Share your reason in the comments. And if you value stories about people learning to set down debts they never borrowed, subscribe and join us for the next one.